will come to order. First order of business, police barracks.
All right, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. So just a bit of a background on the police barracks issue. The facility itself, the police facility, was constructed with sleeping quarters. There's 2 rooms with 4 beds each, 4 for males, 4 for females. It's currently over capacity. I'll talk a little bit about why that's the case on the next slide.
I'm gonna have you keep up your voice just a little with the air going. It's
Okay.
tough. Okay, thanks.
So, in addition to the barracks being over capacity currently, they're not well located in the building. They're in between the locker rooms and the exercise rooms, so it is loud in there and not conducive to sound rest. And as a result of it being over capacity and it being not well located in the building, officers are making alternative arrangements right now. They're couch surfing with friends or family. They're sleeping in a car or an RV. So not sustainable solutions. So the reason why this is occurring is the existing barracks, when they were considered, were really intended for more limited use. So sort of this one-off rest or sleep between shifts. So if you're working a long shift and you had a court appearance the next morning, this provided an option for you. But what we're seeing more of is that folks that are coming in for their 4-day shift, right, are looking for sleeping arrangements for the 3 nights in between, right? So looking not to go back home during that shift period. And that's really the need has changed due to the dynamic of the area. We've got staffing issues that are resulting in more mandatory overtime, so longer shifts overall. Combine that with longer commutes. The average POA commute is about an hour each way. As a safety lever, they're required to have 7 hours off between shifts, but that's intended to be a safety lever that you're not reaching much, but we're having more shifts that are hitting that required 7 hours. And if you do the math with at least an hour-long commute, it doesn't make a lot of sense to go back and forth, right? And we're also, as a result of all these things and just the general dynamic of the area, having some recruitment and retention issues within the police department. So we've looked into sort of options and considerations to try to address this issue. So we can talk about the existing police facility, another city-owned facility, doing a new facility on city property, some other city-funded option, or a community-based option. I'll run through each of those quickly. So in terms of the existing police facility, the issue with noise has always been an issue with the barracks. There were initial efforts to mitigate the noise issues when the building was first opened, and ultimately they weren't able to come to a solution on that. So it is a noisy area in the building, and there's not much that can be done with it. In addition, there's really limited ability to relocate the barracks within the existing facility. There is an excess capacity in the facility, so if we were to move it somewhere, something else would have to give, and there would be an operational impact. And it's probably pretty cost prohibitive in relation to other options that we have. So the use of another city facility, I think, provides the best potential option here. We've got two options: the current Fire Station 25, when the new station's built, or the former Fire Station 26 at 1812 South Norfolk. So we're currently leasing that to AMR. They're using it for rest quarters, and they pay us about $39,000 a year to do so. So both of those facilities could be converted to multi-use facilities. So, and I went, Kathy Kleinbaum and I went on Friday to take a look at 26 and its condition and kind of what could be done there. And it looks like in 26 you could sleep about 12 people at a time. You could use it as a substation east of the freeway, which could be very advantageous to the city with traffic patterns. We can use it as secure vehicle storage, which is important. That's already in place at Fire Station 26, but there appears to be some additional capacity outside the building to do a couple more storage spaces. And when we're able to store vehicles securely on our own property, it means we're not paying to store them off-site, which is very expensive. In terms of cost considerations, in looking at the facility, just as a very rough estimate, it looks like it'd be about $75,000 to $100,000 for one-time site improvements. You know, the bathrooms need some work, some carpet, some paint, just some general tenant improvements to get it ready for usage. We would lose the AMR lease revenue. However, there is the potential to offset it with additional storage if we're able to do that there. And then I would expect there's going to be a modest ongoing maintenance cost, but I don't think it would be too significant given the nature of the building and how it would be used. Another consideration is doing this travel trailer. So for wildland fires, they have these pretty sophisticated trailers that have bathrooms, and you can sleep up to 14 people. The issue of couple issues there is cost considerations. You have to purchase it and then maintain it, but less of an issue, I think, than the cost itself is really a lack of a feasible location. I think the first thing that comes to mind when you think about that is, hey, well, we can just put it out at the courtyard. Well, we're already challenged for space out there, and so putting another facility out there would really impact the Public Works and Parks operations. So it's not something that we couldn't do, but it certainly would impact operations if we did it. Other city-funded options, you could purchase or lease a property for officer use. I mean, obviously, there's a cost consideration there, particularly if we were to purchase a property, and it would be a city asset, but still it'd be an initial outlay of city funds to make that happen. I mean, I think the thing from my perspective that I think we would want to really consider carefully if we wanted to do this was the potential neighborhood issues. Things like parking, odd hours of use, number of people using. We've already started to see in the city with the cost of housing and the challenges that we have, people trying to do creative things with their residential properties that have really stirred up the neighbors in terms of parking and people coming and going at all hours. So it's something we are aware of that could become an issue if we were to do that. We could negotiate a room rate at a hotel. The cost considerations there are really unknown to be based on usage, but that is another option the city could provide. And then finally, there's this notion of community-based options, which is utilizing privately owned facilities via agreements directly with the POA. So like things like ADUs or spare bedrooms, apartments or condos or hotels. So basically the city's saying, okay, this is something that the POA would need to negotiate privately. Where the city is interested there is potential issues if something like this were provided at no cost or provided at a significantly lower cost than what your average person could get those things for, right? Because number one, if it's at no cost, it violates our existing gift policy, right? Certainly issues with perceptions of giving something to a city employee at no cost and what that would mean in terms of, if there's a quid pro quo there. And then certainly an expectation of city intervention if issues arise. There's no way for us to just be totally hands-off here, because when disputes arise in this sort of arrangements, the city would be looked to intervene. And in my discussions with POA, from my perspective, this is an option I do not think we should pursue as a city. I think POA does not look at this as an optimal solution either. Because of the reasons we cite and other reasons specific to the association, but it is an option. And so with that, those are the options we've identified for the time, and I'm happy to take any questions. Yes?
I guess two questions. Can we get out of the lease with AMI, right?
AMR.
AMR, and if so, how long would that take, and what would it cost?
So the existing lease with AMR runs through the end of the calendar year. There's no out clause in the contract, but that doesn't mean that we couldn't have the broker see if they could negotiate something with AMR if there were a desire to get out of that contract early. So we could certainly ask the question, it may cost some money to negotiate our way out of the lease.
Okay.
Question.
Yeah.
Do you see this as a contract between the POA and the city, or is this a situation where it would be an amenity provided by the city to our employees?
My initial thought is I envision it as the latter. So not necessarily an agreement with POA, but just something that the city is providing as part of the agreement with being a police officer. But it could be structured in a number of ways.
And the only reason I was going down the former was, is this a situation where people are using this at all times a day and for more of a private life situation? Is it somewhere we want indemnification or for the POA to have their own insurance for anything that happens? That's a question.
I think if we were given direction tonight to pursue this next phase in the process, to look into this further, I think those are the questions that we would want to answer and then come back and also be able to answer questions about if there's interest in council having us negotiate with AMR a reduction in the time of the end of the lease. We could wrap all that together.
That's where I'm headed, so I don't have any other questions.
We can look into all those issues.
Good.
I guess there's a lot of compelling evidence in favor of this of this idea you're putting forward, I guess, what are the downsides? Like, what are the biggest negatives do you see, if any?
I think they're relatively minimal. I mean, it's the initial cost that we hadn't contemplated to do the tenant improvements. So it's another building we will need to maintain.
Okay,
But otherwise, I don't see a lot of downside to it.
great. Thank you.
Fire Station 25, weren't we looking at getting some of the revenue from potentially the sale of that to help fund its new location?
We had not talked about specifically the sale of Fire Station 25. I mean, I think that had been contemplated, but we haven't had any concrete discussions about initiating that to offset the cost of the new fire station.
Do we know how much a trailer would cost?
I don't. I looked online and tried to. I found them, but we had to call a salesman. Just decide I wasn't going to do that yet.
Are you afraid of a trailer salesman? Wow.
Do you have an
Well,
idea?
Redwood City has done that, but they have land for it. It was something around 55 to 60 for initial, and then maintenance and utilities and hookups and all of that was significant.
Brad said you'd have a great location in the courtyard. Whatever, you could pick whatever
We
corner.
did?
Okay, you had another question.
So we've actually looked, we don't have any sites in San Mateo that could accommodate a trailer?
Not that would be cost effective. I mean, I think with the infrastructure you would need to put in to get the hookups and everything, and really we don't have a lot of spare property.
Yeah.
You know, I think the one that comes to mind is I think over 42nd, but where the Christmas tree lot is, but we're actually going to be using that as a construction easement for the underground flow equalization project.
Okay. Well, then I have a question for the chief, because we've lost 21 officers have left since 2013, citing the commute.
Actually, 31, 21 were commute reasons.
31?
31
30.
total, of which 21
of
were
which
commute
21, right.
reasons.
And the cost, what is the cost to recruit a new police officer?
I don't know, I don't have hard costs on the recruiting. The recruiting alone probably
for
takes
training and-
6 weeks, but for a new officer to onboard for 6 weeks, 6 months of the academy, and then 6 months almost in field training, where we cannot count them during that year as an actual officer for staffing on the beat. It's probably about $150,000, and that's really the cost of academy and the training officer, not the salary of the recruit trainee itself, which is probably about another $150,000. So you could say, we usually use the cost of about $150,000 for each new officer.
So that'd be to replace 21 officers would be a little over $3 million.
One more question. Did you have one more?
Yep.
The 39,000 just goes in the general fund from AMR?
Yes.
Okay, so. Alrighty. Any other questions before we open up public comment?
Did you talk about the stuff?
Okay, so we'll open up for public comment. Do you have speakers, Madam Clerk?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I do. The first speaker is Robert Wheel. One moment, please. And Robert, I'm going to have you come to this microphone right here. And talk into the microphone, please.
Yes.
And I will give you a 3-minute timer.
How many minutes, please?
3 minutes.
You got it.
And how many speakers do we have before we get
We
started?
have 4.
4, excellent. Okay, welcome.
Good evening, my name is Bob Weil, and I'm a member of the Top of the Mountains homeowners. And I think very interesting, and thank you for the various methods. I favor the method of utilizing city facilities if we possibly can. The last one on here, which there were several of us, on the potential issues at no cost, which was brought up at one of our meetings. It was flawed, and there's probably 14 different reasons, which I don't have time, which I'll pass out to the members that are sitting at the table here. The concept of having something free, there's no free lunch. and we have to watch out for both the city, because I'm a member of the organization of the Homeowners Association, but I'm also a citizen of San Mateo, which is important. So I think that anything that's at no cost, which has been presented thus far, is strictly off the table, my personal viewpoint. That's pretty much the lot. I could have a book on this, which I didn't. This is the subject. Any one of these areas would be an area of problems, potential problems. And I'm happy to discuss on a basis of one-on-one.
We'll pass them out for you. I need to keep you near the mic because
Okay.
it won't pick you up on the video.
Fine.
Here, I'll pass them out for you.
Or you can
Thank
give
you
it to
very
me,
much.
please.
There we go. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I got that. Okay.
So what is on the paper there? Probably 14 to 17 various areas of concern that are problems, and large problems. And I would be pleased to address any questions during this meeting or at any other time on a one-to-one basis or as a group. That's pretty much the lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next up.
Yes, next speaker is Anna Cure.
Welcome.
Many years ago, Chief Mannheimer instituted the Neighborhood Safety Action Plan, which allowed our police officers to create relationships with the citizens of San Mateo. This program was so hugely successful for the citizens to get to know our police officers. And this is what makes our city better than our neighboring cities, that these kind of programs exist. So when I heard that we had lost 2 police officers, I immediately, it was the perfect timing, I went to the San Mateo United and I told everyone that, you know, we're losing these good police officers. And there was like a gasp in the room. Who was it? Was it this police officer? Was it that police officer? And what it does, it exemplifies how our citizens really appreciate knowing our police officers. So we don't want to lose them. And everybody, I said, well, go back to your neighborhoods, tell everybody we need bedrooms for the police. And Sean, I'm sorry, but when I came back the next month and I said, well, our city attorney says we can't do this, there's liability involved, it gets complicated. People were yelling at me. And I said, well, he's doing his job, and that's what he's supposed to do, is look out for potential problems. So I can tell you that that offer is out there in still many homes. They want to do it for free. They want to do what they can to help the police. And ultimately, after much discussion, I said, can I have a show of hands of who at this meeting, and our meetings are pretty good size, want our council members to do something? And everyone put their hand up. And I said, so I'm speaking for the organization. We appreciate having the opportunity to get to know our police officers. You know, this relationship building has been so effective, Chief, and we thank you for that. It makes our city exceptional. And we're hoping that you can come up with something, maybe revisit some of the bedroom ideas. It doesn't sound like it's a good option, but certainly we hope there's a facility within our city that can accommodate keeping our police officers and the investment that we've put into them.
Next speaker is Ramona Reagan.
Good evening, my name is Ramona Rabin. I reside at the top of the mounds. I'm here to say thank you to the city for starting the actions to find suitable places for the police officers who live such great distances to rest between their shifts. My understanding is that you are working on it. I hope that you can speed up the actions needed to find suitable places. From everything that I have heard, and just this evening heard the number that it costs us to train a new officer, I think we should view this as an urgent need for the city to solve this problem as soon as we possibly can. And again, I want to thank you for bringing this forward, putting it on the agenda, and allowing us to come and express our support for finding places suitable for these officers to rest. Thank you.
speaker is Myrna DeFries.
Thank you for this opportunity to address you. And again, I would like to really thank the City Council, Chief Mannheimer, Nick Morcelli, and all of you for trying to find a solution to a really distressing problem. The police officers need to have your support, and they need to have a place to rest during shifts. So I am also from the top of the mounds, and we fully supported having them stay with us because it's a critical matter. I realize that there are others here who do not support it. But the city, even if you can find something temporary to solve the problem until you can find a permanent solution, I really, really appreciate and thank you for moving forward with it and hope you find a very quick solution. Thank you.
Thank you, and last speaker we have is Drew.
Hello, everyone. It's just another great presentation as far as there's some existing facilities that I would have never even thought. And then the fact that like the one on North Fork could serve as potentially a substation, like it's a kind of a win-win potentially to do some other things. So I do wonder, stepping one step farther back, is it only police officers who could stay in this, or could firefighters stay in this if they had a back-to-back kind of thing? And also, if this was a disaster, like had we had an earthquake or something like that, and public works people need to be working nonstop, pretty much shift after shift to deal with whatever roads and whatever stuff, could they stay in it? So is it like police primary with, and then under certain protocols, could other people use that facility? And then I almost wonder too, just given the hiring and given the general thing, is like, say the North Fork facility is like a phase 1, it's kind of a pilot, try it. If it's successful, potentially the fire station, reusing the other fire station is a later phase, like a phase 2 with some more capacity and possibly longer term. I remember there was talk about the Courtyard's gonna have a master plan, which probably would have some building and stuff, and maybe part of that master plan could include, hey, we're gonna build a facility in part that could serve this thing. Now that's longer out, maybe that's 5-10 years out, but it's like almost a progression of, hey, we're gonna keep doing this. How does that work? It's working, let's expand a little bit more. It's a recruiting tool and stuff, just for the city, kind of the city, and also for disaster. I mean, there's gonna be an earthquake, there's gonna be stuff, and how do we survive that and stuff? And we need a lot of different departments to make that work. So, but I love the presentation, thank you.
Okay, so we'll bring back to the council.
But I want to first thank all the people who spoke tonight, as well as our residents for their support for our police department. And I thank staff for the information they provided, which I think really brought home how serious this issue is. I've always held the unwavering position that public safety is our #1 priority, and so I'm really concerned about the impact the housing crisis is having on our first responders and our police officers in particular, because it threatens the level of responsiveness, along with impacting our officer morale, their health and safety, and the legendary community relations we have, all of which has made San Mateo a model of safety and harmony through the years. So police commitment to PAL, to their community involvement and understanding our neighborhoods, and the culture all erode when our officers live long distances. Our cost of living has now put San Mateo in a severe struggle to attain and retain top quality police personnel, and as we found in this police report, few can really afford to live here. I think only 25 of our officers even live in San Mateo County, just 11 in the city of San Mateo. And the rest live outside of the county, and their long days, as well as being required to work the chronic staffing shortages, coupled with long commutes, it really does put their personal safety and effectiveness at risk. So, the ability of our first responders to quickly report for duty in the event of a major disaster is also a frightening thing to contemplate. In the big picture, workforce housing and other creative housing assistance for our police officers is a critical need and a direct correlation to keeping our city safe. So for me, in the meantime, I think a good stopgap measure is to look at, can we negotiate out of Station 26. And if we can do that quickly, I think there's a lot of advantages to going to Station 26. I especially like the idea of a substation, because with traffic the way it is today, police response times can be difficult on that east-west connection. If this isn't possible, I really support either renting a private residence, assuming we can handle parking issues that might come up, or coordinating with a local hotel in some way to provide whatever sleeping quarters are needed. And when I asked the chief about the cost for training, to me, that's a huge indicator. If we're looking at $150,000 just for one officer, I don't see how we cannot afford to stop that flow of officers leaving and provide sleeping quarters for them. So to me, that's the clearest path to saving money, to ensuring the safety of our community, which I think is a major priority for all of us, and to retaining good officers to serve us by immediately doing what we can to procure some kind of sleeping quarters.
Well, I concur. Oh,
No, go, you go.
I concur with Councilmember Fresquet's comments almost completely. I just had a couple things I wanted to add. Another plus of this location, I think, is to just add a police presence in that area of San Mateo that's had some challenges lately. And the last thing I just wanted to add, I just want to thank the members of the community for their proactive work on this issue. And I think that activism is what makes San Mateo great. And I really think that this is an issue that we've all known, that we've all kind of had it in our subconscious, that it's just boiling up, but it was really the residents of the Mounds, Ms. Cure, who really kind of sparked this to get it going, I think. And so I want to thank the members of the community, and I support this.
I like what I'm going to call Plan A that you brought forward to us. I like the idea of a substation with storage for vehicles and a housing component. I feel like there's two ways to set this up. If we are subleasing to the POA, it's going to feel more like this is the hotel option, and the city doesn't have liability there. If it's set up more like the barracks that are at the police station, there's going to be strict rules on how it's used, and I'd be open to giving the officers who use it more flexibility to feel like they're actually off duty while they're there. So I'd like to see, when you bring it back to us, bring back both options, because there's pluses and minuses based on liability, pluses and minuses to the officers on how they're going to be allowed to use it. I think those are the things that I will be interested in when you bring it back. But I don't think we even need a Plan B. I like this option a lot.
Okay, if I could, through the mayor, if I could comment on that. So I think one of the things we'll have to consider in terms of the legal structure of it is the fact that we're making it a substation as well. So there will be a police operation running out of there. So, but we will look into our options as it relates to that. As it relates to the timing and sort of the Plan A, and I'll speak for POA, but they are here and they can speak if I misspeak. But you know, as the conversations that I've had with them, they also believe that 26 is the best option, and if the direction is given to go forward with 26 and get it prepared for them to use as the barracks and the substation, they are prepared to wait and not try to, and really want us to focus on that versus focus on that, but also do something in the interim as well. So that will get us sort of our Plan A solution as the solution as quickly as we're able to do so.
So, may I ask a follow-up? So if we are not able to negotiate out of the lease, the quickest we could do something would be January?
The quickest we'd be able to get in the building is January.
And the POA are okay with waiting that long?
You guys want to answer that?
So,
Go to the mic.
Oh.
Thanks.
so my name is Nick Morsilli. When this conversation began last year, I was the president of the Police Officers Association. Nicole Longlon is now. In speaking with Drew about the feasibility of Fire Station 26, we see that as the best option, as the 1A option. It serves so many different facets from the community to the department to the city to the POA. Because of that, we're willing to wait if need be. But as many people came up to the microphone, spoke to, it's still an issue. We wouldn't want to do anything to jeopardize an agreement to move into Fire Station 26, but there is a need right now. So if we can't get out of that agreement early, if there was topics or discussion on alternate ideas, we'd be open to them, absolutely. But we're not going to go out and jeopardize an agreement to get into Fire Station 26.
Okay, because that would be my first choice, is we negotiate out of Station 26. But if that can't be done quickly, then I don't think we have the luxury of waiting until next January or another 6 months. To me, this is kind of a critical situation that we have to take on now to kind of find an interim solution, with the best possible solution being Station 26.
I agree.
If I may. Now let's come to me. Yeah, Station 26 would be my first priority. If there is a delay, given that it seems like this is a very critical need at this moment in time, one of the things we may want to explore is if we can get some hotel vouchers for a short period of time to kind of bail us out for a while. So I'd be willing, if you guys are in concurrence, maybe we can instruct staff to explore that, to give us that, 6 months holdover, just in case, because we have some people traveling some very long distances when they're very tired, and that just cannot happen anymore. So if we could somehow do that, if you guys could support me,
I think the beauty of the hotel, because I was either primary residence or hotel. The thing about a hotel is the coming and going is not going to be impactful on a neighborhood.
That's right.
With officers coming late at night. So that would be the ideal backup to Substation 26. And can I add one other comment? Because I know there's Station 25, and it's going to be a while before that's vacated. But I think I would like us to kind of hold that as another backup. And I think Drew made some good comments about housing, and maybe we need to look at our overall emergency plan and how we would deal with the fact that we have a lot of employees that live out of San Mateo County and across the bay, and how would we house them in an emergency. And so perhaps if the council agrees, we might just hold Station 25 with the idea that it may become sleeping quarters down the road, and kind of see what happens with Station 26 and where the economy takes us and all.
I think there are some provisions in place in the event of an emergency. We have access to maybe schools and that kind of stuff too, but we'll have to explore that and see kind of where we're headed. But I think we should get started on this,
Yeah,
but we'll keep it in the back of our mind. How's that?
sounds good to me.
Okay. Good. You need anything else from us? I think we're all in concurrence about 26 and perhaps exploring maybe some hotel vouchers to get us through the 6-month period.
So we will work to get out of 26 as quickly as possible. And if it's amenable to council, we'll have those conversations with POA. And if it's soon enough and we can get them moving in, we'll go that route. And if it's not, we'll look towards that and the hotel option. Is that workable?
Yes, sir.
And do we
Okay.
need some kind of time frame on that or not? I mean,
If it's amenable to you all, I'll work with POA and we'll come to a solution on what the time frame is.
Okay, perfect.
If that's okay.
Yep.
Okay.
That works.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay, before we start the next item, if we're here just for the police barracks item, if you could go ahead and exit, and then the Cal Water item.
You don't want to talk water?
Can you fix that one?
Thank you, sir. Thanks for being here, Nick.
Nice to meet you. Thanks.
Oh, yeah.
Did you get you working? The water items on the desk. Spent like a half hour on the phone with her over the weekend trying to open
I downloaded Chrome on this. I did it on my own computer at home, so I wasn't even equipped to come tonight. And the password thing was never working for me. I have no idea why.
That didn't work for me initially.
She reset it for some reason.
No, yours was 2. Or do you need
Hi, how are you?
seats up here?
3 would be great.
Okay, we can do this. Okay, come on in and have a seat, please. We need to keep the meeting going. Cal Water can come sit up here. Please
Ross,
come
why
and
don't you
have a
come
seat.
sit with
Please
me?
seat.
Yeah, I would have Scott sit up here too. Move down one. There's room. Go up to Brad and stay. Play by ear. And use the marching orders, otherwise they climate change marches.
I'm sorry, did I say that out loud?
Didn't offer up your house.
We have some things we need. Okay, welcome water people. So let's start with Cal Water. Do we have a presentation from staff first, or we're going directly to Cal Water? Looks like we're going directly to Cal Water. Yes? Okay.
Sounds good to us. Already. Okay. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name's Kevin McCusker, and I'm with California Water Service. I've got two of my colleagues up here with me, Scott Wagner, who's with our Engineering and Capital Delivery Division, and Ross Moylan, who's our Chief Operator and District Manager for our Bayshore District here. We've got several other Cal Water people and representing operations and water conservation in case any questions come up that fall into their areas of expertise. I know time's of the essence, so I'll try and proceed as quickly as possible to give you plenty of time for questions.
Okay.
So just to give you a quick overview, and I'll move very quickly through this portion, but we've been here in San Mateo since 1931, about 106,000 people. In addition to what you see on the screen, we have service areas up and down the state, serve more than 2 million Californians. We are the third largest investor-owned water utility in the United States. We're the largest west of the Mississippi. In total, more than 6,500 miles of main. If you laid it end to end, it would stretch from New York City to Beijing. And that's just to give you a sense of the scope and the longevity and the expertise that we have. Here we have over 2,000 hydrants. I think it's important to note that the quality of the water system also goes towards your public protection classification. I know City of San Mateo has an excellent one, and the quality of our water system comprises a significant portion of that score. The water meets all primary and secondary state standards. And right now, a typical residential bill customer is paying a little bit more than 1 cent per gallon. So this is a little bit on really what we're here to talk about, which is our infrastructure investment and improvement plan. This is a process we go through every 3 years. In the past 3-year cycle, we invested more than any other water company in the state at $628 million statewide. Locally, in the Bayshore District, in this cycle that is currently closing, we invested $74 million here in the Bayshore District, which includes San Mateo. That included 5 miles of main that's been replaced in San Mateo for about a $14 million investment. And in this current cycle that we're in right now, our current filing with the Public Utilities Commission, we are proposing to invest an additional $49 million, and that's just here in the infrastructure for the City of San Mateo's water system. Some very broad things that we're looking at for capital improvement projects. Almost 11 miles of main that is at risk of leak or aging that we propose to replace. Pump station to be rebuilt, storage tank replacement, valve maintenance and replacement. In a little bit more detail, MRP stands for Main Replacement Program. This is of interest in reducing leaks and preventing water loss. Infrastructure, including water main, has a useful lifespan and has to be replaced. And what we've done over the past several years and into this is to ramp up to 100-year replacements that we're turning over that main every 100 years. In addition, we're looking at investing in a water supply and facilities master plan for next year. And again, that is to look at analyzing supply, demand, and facilities. Some other things that are proposed or are upcoming with regard to this and seem to be of interest in our presentation last month to the Infrastructure and Sustainability Commission. We are proposing a regional reliability study, and again, this is to investigate what projects are necessary here in the peninsula for water source development, updating and following up on the climate change study with a new one for 2021. And part of our regular planning cycle, we are required every 5 years to update our urban water management plan. And that's in which we review supply and demand and account for things like conservation, changing water use habits, and climate change. AMI is automated metering infrastructure and it's remote metering. This seemed to be of interest at a presentation we did last month, so we wanted to touch on it. This is something that we are investigating in some of our service areas and piloting. It previously has been opposed and not recommended by the California Public Advocates Office, so it has been a difficult thing to get in, and we're dealing with it right now in a couple of test areas. Additional items include backup generators for fire protection and increased conservation. And we're going to get to a slide where we talk a little bit about what we've requested for amounts to spend on water conservation. So this is the main replacement program process, and it's part of our infrastructure improvement plan every 3 years. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. But with a focus on main replacement, this is a component that, just like the rest of the plan, has to be reviewed by the California Public Utilities Commission every 3 years, and we have to get approved of what mains are going to be replaced. And the effort here by the parties involved, which is Cal Water, California Public Advocates Office, the California Public Utilities Commission, and the other parties who choose to get involved, is to balance the cost effect on customer water bills with that need to replace those aging mains. And obviously, again, as I said, there's a useful lifespan, so you can't replace, you're not doing anybody any favors by replacing the main when it still is useful. You're only affecting customer bills without having any gain. So you're trying to find that balance between useful lifespan and not keeping them in the ground too long when they fail. This shows the ramp up here in the main replacement program. We've kind of taken a new approach going back to 2015, and we've been able to increase that replacement rate to meet what is considered an industry best practice of 100 years. We're not 100 years statewide, but we are at 100 years here for San Mateo in the next 3 years. We're on pace to be at 100 years here in this next cycle, as proposed, I should say. This is, again, replacing main is one of the ways that we guard against water loss, and this shows the decline in main break history here in the Bay Shore. We were not able to pull out individual San Mateo for this, so Bay Shore includes the Mid-Peninsula area as well as South San Francisco, and you can see a decline in main break history going back to 1992 as we become better and better stewards at what we're doing here. So to take a look at where we rank in this type of thing, there is a median annual break rate for water utilities across the country, 10.2 per 100 miles. And even that is less than what is the American Water Works Association's agreed upon standard, which is 15 or less per 100 miles is considered optimized. So we are better than both of those and continuing to improve all the time on it. So compared to our other water companies and water purveyors, we're on the one of the better ones in the industry. So this is a little bit to talk about the infrastructure improvement plan, and what we do is we have to propose these to the California Public Utilities Commission every 3 years, so that the cost of water service reflects the true and current cost of delivering that water service. These type of improvements and maintenance do wind up having a bill effect, and as submitted, our customers would see a 10-cent per day increase that starts in 2020 if it were approved as we have proposed. But we do not set the rates, nor do we get the final say in what projects get approved. That's done by the California California Public Utilities Commission. In addition, there's an independent arm of the CPUC that is called the Public Advocates Office, or CalPA for short. And this independent agency is set up solely to vet all of the proposals and make recommendations back to the PUC and get involved in the process by looking through it, mostly with a focus on cost of service. Their statutory mission is to obtain the lowest possible rate for service. And I like to point out that, that's really our goal too. We are concerned about cost of service, but we're also concerned about reliability and safety. And so although the different parties come at it from different angles, we really have the same end goal here. And that's true of all the parties and our customers too, as everybody wants the water service to be safe and reliable at the most affordable rate that is possible. And that is the process we're in right now. We filed this current case in July of 2018. And the goal is to have a final decision from the commission, if everything went according to schedule, by the end of this calendar year for new rates to take effect in 2020. So we were asked to talk a little bit about water conservation and water efficiency, and so I wanted to highlight some stuff that we do have available. We have a robust and industry-leading conservation program, and these are some of the things we make available to our customers. Rebates on high-efficiency toilets, clothes washers, irrigation controllers, conservation kits, which include some items that people can employ in their household to cut their water use. Bathroom fixture replacements. We have one in development, which is our smart irrigation controller installation, will be coming soon and soon to be available for residents. And home water use evaluations, again, for residential customers. We have an additional suite of programs that are for our business and industry customers that are similar, not identical, but very similar. This is to show you here in the Mid-Peninsula what the legislated targets are for water consumption and where we are on meeting those targets. So going back to 2009, we were already below the mandated 20% by 2020 target, and we've continued to pare down from there. A little bit of bounce back there in 17 and 18, but you can see the overall trend is a good one and going down at 91 gallons per capita per day. The 2015 target, by the way, too, the blue line was the mandated reduction during the governor's declared state of emergency around the drought. So looking at what we've done for water efficiency and water conservation for our customers here in the Mid-Peninsula area, 21 million gallons since 2018. Those are the programs that I mentioned before that have been instituted since 2018, and this is the amount of water that those programs will save during the course of their useful lifetime. And this is something that we've been doing since really well before the state of emergency tied to the drought. So our conservation, as I said, it's a really robust program that we've been attacking for a long time. So if you track it back even pre-drought to 2011, lifetime cumulative savings so far at 1.5 billion gallons. This one's a little bit hard to read, but the intent here is to show kind of where we stack up in water losses compared to some other service areas. So we are the white line there at 16.58 gallons per connection per day. I just want to point out, because there seemed to be some misunderstanding in this metric last month when we presented to the Sustainability Commission. When we say that the gallons are measured per connection, that doesn't mean that each connection is individually leaking 16 gallons. It's just a measurement to say, take the total amount lost and divide it by the number of connections, not to say that any individual or one particular service connection is leaking versus another. But you can see we stack up favorably to most of the purveyors in the region.
It's actually before the meter too, so customers aren't paying for that loss.
Yeah.
Their meter.
And because, if it were post meter, it'd be more difficult for us to track too. Again, this is another way to kind of look at where we stack up. The median for California is 26.69, and where it's 16.58, 16.6 rounded up. And if you look at where the U.S. EPA has the 2015 studies at 39.88. So you can see that we're actually much better than the industry standards when it comes to water loss. So again, I want to highlight that the filing with the CPUC is a process. We're a highly regulated industry. We don't have discretion to spend simply based on what we believe to be the best choices. So what we do is we make the best possible proposal for spending, whether that be main replacement or conservation. California Public Advocates makes a report saying what they think is best. And then in the end, the commission makes a final decision. So this is to give you an idea of how some of these things unfold. In the 14-16 cycle, just for water conservation here in the Mid-Peninsula and South San Francisco area, we asked for a little bit over $2 million that we wanted to use for water conservation. That was countered by public advocates who asked for less than $1 million or recommended less than $1 million. And in the end, we got just barely over $1 million from approved. And so you can see the filing years, the years in which they were spent. So the GRC number indicates the year it was filed. The period indicates the years in which the money would be spent, what we proposed, what public advocates countered, and then the final decision from the CPUC. And again, that's to highlight the fact that we don't have final discretion on what we spend or how we can spend it. This is just to highlight the fact that I mentioned some of it earlier, the Urban Water Management Plan, our Conservation Master Plan. There is numerous required documents, both regulatory and legislatively required, that we have to file and update as living documents on an ongoing basis to make sure that the information is correct and accurate and up to date. And that last item there is our drought contingency Schedule 14. And I ran through it very fast because I wanted to give you the chance to ask questions. And
Okay, excellent. I just have one quick question. What was 1 cent a gallon? You said something is 1 cent?
a little bit over 1 cent per gallon is what a typical residential customer in San Mateo pays for Cal Water service.
So when it goes up by 10 cents a day in 2020, we'll pay how much per gallon? Do you know the answer?
It'll still be less than 2 cents per gallon.
Okay.
Based on average residential use. So let me give you a different way to think of it here. So a typical residential bill right now, total monthly bill is $68.53.
That's average, is that what you're telling me?
Yeah,
Okay,
that's typical residential.
68.53, okay.
And then that would go up, as proposed, that would go up by $2.96 in 2020.
About 70,
Yeah,
say
so
70 bucks or so?
71 bucks
71
per month for typical usage. Now, if somebody uses more, it could be higher. If somebody uses less, it could be lower. But based on typical usage patterns, that's what we'd be looking at. And again, that's what we've proposed. That's not necessarily what will be the final bill.
So 24 bucks a year more on your
Give or
average
take.
household. Okay, I just wanted to get those numbers
Yep.
straight in my mind. I appreciate the rest of it. I'm going to call on other folks for questions, but I might have a few more. Did you have some questions?
Yeah. Regarding your your regional reliability study that's scheduled for 2020, and then the climate change study for 2021. What is the timeline for kind of active steps to act upon after you do these studies? So how long do these studies take, and then how long does it usually take your company to react to the changes in the studies?
Nicole, did you want to talk a little bit about what we're doing on a regional level? I can tell you that, as part of the urban water management plan process, which actually includes, a topic of climate change, it is definitely a concern and something that we've been looking at and studying very carefully to make sure that our programs and plans include that. And obviously water supply sustainability is a portion of that. Conservation, education, and programs that we're continuing as part of that, along with the good work that's been happening in this area and it continues. The needle's been moving in the right direction. We purchase all of our supply through the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, or the SFPUC. So obviously there's a heavy reliance on different programs and things that they're doing and they're involved with to ensure that the supply that we're supposed to get, we get. Bosca representative Nicole is here, and she can speak a little bit more to what Bosca is doing and working with the SFPUC and some of those programs, if you'd like to hear from her.
Is it okay if I have Nicole address that? And I also want you to address the fire issue. But Nicole, I must impose on you to come to this microphone here so the video can hear you. You'll tell us who you are.
I will, absolutely. Good afternoon, council members. Nicole Sankula. I'm the Chief Executive Officer for the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency. And I'm sorry I have not actually come before you then today. So we're a regional agency that represents all 26 water suppliers that buy water from the San Francisco Hetch Hetchy Regional Water System, including Cal Water. We represent those agencies in their negotiations and in their contract with San Francisco with a goal of a reliable supply of high-quality water at a fair price. With regards to the specific question, Cal Water and all my agencies buy water by contract with San Francisco. They have a perpetual right for that water, meaning San Francisco has a perpetual obligation to provide up to 184 million gallons of water per day to all of them together. And my job is to hold them to that and to make sure that they meet that contractual commitment. And work with them to make the improvements they need to do that. So when you talk about reliability, right now, 85% of the supply that's delivered to that system comes from the Tuolumne River. We are highly dependent upon one source. One of the things we're aggressively looking at with San Francisco is about what diversification do we need to do to that source to meet what is the future and the concerns about the future. You're not going to replace it completely, but you can diversify, make investments in additional storage capacity, in recycled water, those types of things. And we're working aggressively with San Francisco on that. And we're looking at things like participating in expanded surface storage that others are proposing, like expanded Los Vaqueros in the eastern Contra Costa County, participating hopefully in a conjunctive use operation with some agricultural interests on the Tuolumne River. Looking at recycled water throughout the service area for not just what has been the traditional non-potable use, like the purple pipe use, that if you're familiar with what's used in Redwood City, but more treating it to a higher level standard and possibly putting it directly into the drinking water supply. Kind of the next level of use that people are looking at for that type of supply. And combinations of those, in addition to increased water use efficiency and work on leak detection and actually expanding significantly our control of those. So that's, for example, that's what Cal Water looks to me for, and all my agencies look to me for, to basically make sure that San Francisco meets that obligation, and if they can't meet it, that they take the steps necessary to meet it, because that's what they're obligated to do. And that's my job. And I have a board of 26, so from each of the member agencies that sit on my board. For Cal Water, one of the officers for Cal Water sits on the Bosca board as well. On the fire issue, and it was another issue that came up, this system has made significant investments for reliability for emergencies. In 2002, the communities that rely on the system went to Sacramento and forced San Francisco to forced legislation to require San Francisco to make investments so the system could withstand a seismic event. So all of your water customers, the 1.8 million residents, have paid $4.8 billion to make sure that this system is reliable. And that's not just for seismic events. It's also for things like fires. And an example of this, and as I was thinking about it today, back in August of 2013, we had the Rim Fire up in the Tuolumne watershed. Very concerning at the idea of, our entire watershed area was burning, what's going to be the impact on that supply. We had made the right investments so that San Francisco was able to take that supply offline, and the needs of all the water customers in 4 counties, San Francisco County, San Mateo County, Santa Clara, and Alameda County, were met by water supply that had been stored in the East Bay, in San Francisco's reservoirs, and in here behind us in the peninsula. And no one knew anything. There was a smooth transition. Water supply continued to go. That is exactly the way it's supposed to be. We really don't like news in the water industry when water doesn't happen. And that transition happened. And then we tested the water after the fire, got some control, understood, and just moved right back into normal operations. The system has been designed to do that. So while it seems like, for example, here in San Mateo, you get your water from the reservoirs behind you, in fact, you have access to all 3 sources of supply: the Hetchy, East Bay reservoirs, and the reservoirs behind you. And the ability to treat them if there is an event, for example, the ability to take them offline if there is an event. So that's the benefit of all this investment that we've had. And I think it's important for us to remind ourselves, because it is part of the reason why our water bills are so high. That's a significant local investment to really yield that increased reliability. Lastly, San Francisco does have an aggressive fire protection program that they implement on their watersheds. And I've been in communication with them. I've actually asked them to come speak to the BOSCA board in July on that particular issue, and certainly be willing to share whatever information I get from that as well.
I think you had said that Calaveras could feed into here for 3 months if something happened up at Crystal Springs. Is that right?
Yes. So the way the system's set up is, we have 3 months of supply. If something were to happen first to Hetchy, we have 3 months supply between the 2 local supplies that could meet the entire system's demand, including San Francisco, which is a significant amount of supply. If something were to happen to Crystal Springs, absolutely there is the ability to feed the entire system from Hetchy all by itself, or Hetchy and the reservoirs from the East Bay.
Okay, thank you so much. I know there are other questions. I just wanted to get that background because it may circumvent some other questions, but I don't know. So you had more, sorry.
Well, and I think Scott has some more specifics about how the studies get incorporated into our planning. That's his bailiwick.
Directly at the Cal water level.
Directly answer your question. So those 2 studies, the first one was how long do those studies take? The climate change study would definitely be less than a year. The regional reliability study could be 1 to 2 years depending on some of the modeling, but we're not talking long studies. It's more working with the consultant to understand that. And the second piece is how long does it take to implement it? And that can be a very different timeline depending on the projects that are involved. And it really goes down the 2 paths. Are you looking at the future supply needs? We receive water from San Francisco, but we are always looking at what are other ways that we can increase our reliability. Those projects are much bigger projects. You could be talking desalination, you could be talking recycled water that are millions of dollars in multiple agencies that could take years and years to bring together. That's the one side. The other side, instead of just getting more, it's keeping what you have. And that's when you get into the pipeline replacements, when you get into the leak analysis. That's where we can look on the 3-year basis in our rate case to aggressively replace the pipe, to identify certain areas that we need to capture more water, and we can move on those quickly to accomplish those. So it really depends on what projects you're talking about.
Thank you. Questions?
I had just one, because I know you saw, we received a number of communications, some of them from members of our Sustainability and Infrastructure Commission. The one item that just struck out for me was that at the presentation you made before the Sustainability and Infrastructure Commission, that you agreed that, or acknowledged that over 400,000 gallons of water per day are lost in city of San Mateo due to system-wide leakage, and I just wanted to have you comment on that, whether that's accurate, and if it is, how are you addressing that? Because that seems like a lot of water, if that's indeed true.
It is a lot of water, and it's not something that we're satisfied with, but I think it's important to understand that the data point that you come up with, the 400,000 gallons, is what we refer to as non-revenue water. That is water that, as I mentioned, does not make it to the meter at your house or business. It's really system loss due to leaks, construction activities, thefts, water main breaks. I mean, if you look back at the main break that many of you probably recall that we had in February of 2018 on El Camino, millions of gallons of water was released that was not metered, right? That's system loss that we're talking about. So although significant, I think it's important to realize that that data point that's used as an industry standard, we actually have a good story to tell in this area. One, that is a lower number, and one of the slides that you had earlier shows where we fall from that data point with other water systems. That's not to throw other water systems under the bus. It's merely to say we have a good story to tell. Our community should be proud. We're doing the right things. We're not satisfied for 16.6. We'd all love to have 0, right? And we have leak detection programs that are in place to try to get that number a lot lower. But that number is a good number. It's better than it was before, much better. It's almost twice as good as it was, I think, about 10 years prior. So it is definitely a significant change in the right direction, and there's more programs in place to reduce it further.
One other thing to qualify there is to, nobody's satisfied with the number, but that it is lower than the industry standard, considerably lower. And two, that there was a comment made last month about that offsets any of the water conservation program gains. But what I think got lost in that conversation is water conservation gains are water that never has to be produced to begin with. So you're not necessarily offsetting one versus the other, because it's still, the water conservation and efficiency gains are still real gains based on long-term modified behaviors by our customers, and they should be applauded for that. And that's water that never has to be produced. So it's saved, even despite the fact that we're always combating water loss, whether it's through flushing or breaks or anything else.
Okay,
Sorry.
thank you.
Just one more final question is why is it that the public advocates doesn't give you as much as what you're asking for as it related to the conservation? When you showed us that slide and it says they always allow you to do less than what you're requesting.
So it's the nature of their mission. And their mission is prescribed in their enabling language within their legislation, that they are trying to attain the lowest possible rate for service. And they are required to always view things that way. So reliability and safe service levels, which includes conservation, because reliability requires conservation, are colored by which direction you are looking. Are you looking reliability first and then looking for the most cost effective? Or are you looking for the lowest cost possible and then reliability second? And I don't want to speak for CalPA, because I believe that they do their job sincerely, and we it's probably wrong to say it's a collaborative process, but it's a thorough process. It's just that we tend to attack the problem from very different angles, if that makes sense. It really has to do with that cost of service issue. It has to be forefront to them because that's part of their enabling language.
But when you lose $400,000, 400 gallons a day, you pick up the tab on that, right? Because you already bought it from SFPUC, and that's just your loss.
That is lost water. Some of it's the cost of doing business when it comes to flushing and things like that have to be done, and some of it is why we invest in main replacement to stop breakages.
Okay. Any other questions?
Public comment.
Oh, public comment. Pardon me. Let's open it up for public comment.
I have
Do
no
we have
speaker
speaker
slips
slips?
besides Nicole.
Nicole. We've got somebody come.
Oh, thank you. But I've
Any-
shortened my request.
Okay. Anybody else want to give public comment, just so we know ahead of time? Okay. Please state your name also.
Yes. I'm Carol Steinfeld. I moved here 10 years ago from a very wet state, and I've lived in California in the past. And I'm often struck by how little water conservation there is here. especially given that's an arid state. But I get that there have been major gains. However, all I'm asking for is, I think we need a city working group to talk about the issues and do some more proactive planning around water and wastewater. The treatment plant, for example, is a very reactive design. It's a reactive project because of the cease and desist order. But that's something that's sort of a result of some planning that should have happened a couple decades ago or even a decade ago. So I'm thinking a city working group that would look like, I know Rick Bonilla is interested in water and wastewater, or at least water, and maybe a couple members of the Sustainability and Infrastructure Commission. A few reasons I think we need this. In 2017, Cal Water asked for, sought permits for its new building. And a couple of us asked for a gray water and rainwater system, which I thought was a very easy ask because it was supposed to be a demonstration building or a place for classes. And the prior director was against that. And that's what sensitized me to the issue that we in this city do not have a public water utility as other cities do. So I think we just need some kind of citizen and elected official or commissioner input, maybe something that meets 2 or 3 times a year. Note that SFPUC's SF Water does much more water demand management than we do. They have water demand offsets, point of sale conservation fixture reviews and switch outs, and a really interesting water reuse program. And you see that if you see the Salesforce Tower, that has its own wastewater treatment system in it. Remember that Gavin Newsom just required all state agencies to create water resilience plans. We should have that too. And remember, we can't be on the BOSCA board. That's not what it's about. So Rick once asked about that, Rick Bonilla, and was told he should attend the meetings. So I feel like there's a lot of good information we heard today that the citizenry should know about. It should somehow be systematized. And remember that water conservation is wastewater reduction. And we have a very expensive new plant coming up with denitrification. Denitrification is very expensive. It uses a lot of energy. It's the biggest power user, electricity user in Palo Alto, for example, which denitrifies. We want to skim some flows off that, just as San Francisco is doing. And this topic has been bumped from Sustainability Commission and then never made it to the agenda as Sustainability and Infrastructure Commission. So I think that that commission is stretched thin, has a lot of other issues. Again, another reason to have a working group. So that's what I'm asking you, or proposing today. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Okay, no other speakers, we'll bring it back to the council.
Very briefly, thank you very much for the presentation. I appreciate everything that you do. I wish we could do more. Nicole, thank you so much for your representation and for being a resident. And I think you do many good things for us. I'm very proud of the work that we do. I think it comes down to a fundamental challenge, which is how we pay for water. Water's too cheap. Water's too cheap, and I wish we could go to a graduated scale for how we pay for water based on users. I wish there's a lot of things we could do. We would need a constitutional amendment to do some of those things. It's very hard. I appreciate all the water that we give to the food industry. We should still grow things in California, maybe not cotton, but other things. And I would like to see the wastewater treatment plant come full circle and be recycling the water, make it potable, give it back to you guys, blend it in with the system. I think we need to go there. So I'd like to see you asking for funding in your maybe the next round to make that happen, because it's going to happen sooner than later. So I take this very seriously. I know everybody in San Mateo takes this very seriously. You're doing a lot. We'd like to do more. I'm on the side of it's not expensive enough. We pay too little for water, and that's why it gets wasted a lot of the time. Those are my comments.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with his comments about how we pay too little for water, and I think San Mateo is a little bit more progressive community when it comes to that, and I'm hoping that you will take it back when you're working on your plans, taking that feedback into account. I also, regarding the studies that you're working on, I think you are working on a lot of great programs that don't necessarily make it out to the public, and so I don't know how we go about doing this, but I would love to see like more communication to the different cities, to your customers. And thank you very much for this thorough presentation. I think there was a lot of, I think our Sustainability and Infrastructure Commission asked a lot of questions that you maybe weren't expecting, and I appreciate that you took that input and you focused a lot of your presentation today. So thank you.
Maureen?
I would just echo what Councilmember Rodriguez said. I do think there was a lot of questions that came up, and I think you addressed those so that we have a better understanding of how the water system really works. And I'm glad you're working on climate change and conservation. I do think, we might, I'm not sure whether we want to continue to have the Sustainability and Infrastructure Commission work on addressing water management. I'm not, it might be something staff might look at as whether there's some value, since it came before them a couple times and got dropped. But I appreciate the presentation tonight, so thank you.
Yeah, wasn't there, there was some, are you working on gray water with Santa Clara Valley Water District? Did I understand that?
I'm not familiar with that specifically. Are you?
I mean, we purchase water from Santa Clara Valley Water District for the Los Altos area, but I'm not familiar.
Yeah, no, you don't participate in any gray water except for the more the rain barrel type replacement, and then the building codes work that we did with the different buildings to allow the different cities to allow it to happen. But you haven't gone so far yet to kind of require it. That tends to be in communities where you have brand new homes, big homes, where the developer puts the gray water system in as they're developing. That's the most cost-effective version of that. Retrofitting existing homes tends to be very cost-effective and usually requires more active participation by the homeowner themselves, because it tends to be kind of it's kind of like an aftermarket system.
Yeah.
So the biggest savings and the most effective programs are ones that are built into the design as the buildings are happening.
Okay, got it. Okay, yeah, so I would, thank you all for the presentations. I would concur that, yes, this city is probably a little more aggressive than other cities, especially as it relates to conservation. I know we've had some good years, but we remember all too well the lean years. So I'm not too sure why it's so difficult to get public advocates to kind of join, especially as Councilmember Goethals said, we're not talking about huge dollars here as we spread around that risk to do these sorts of conservation efforts. So that's kind of where this council is coming from. I think we may have Ms. Ankula back to come tell us a little more about Bosca in the interest, as Councilmember Rodriguez indicated, with what sort of conservation is really going on regionally as well. And you had something to say, Ross.
Yeah, Mayor and City Council, first of all, just thanks for having us here. We appreciate it. And in the interest of time, we didn't really get into it too much tonight, but I know it was a topic at the commission level. And that was really the smart metering or AMI infrastructure. Kind of the programs you're talking about and kind of working with the public advocate office, it really means a lot when we actually receive comments from cities that we serve in. So certainly obviously up to you as a city, but if you included a letter of comment, and I know we're still in the comment period, I think there's a deadline approaching, it could go a long ways in getting their attention. So I would certainly encourage you to do that if you would like to kind of maybe get their attention a little bit. We'd certainly welcome that.
Yeah, if I can piggyback on that for 1 second, I know you're pressed for time, but we've worked with several parties to either provide input on draft comments that they've made, or in some cases they've asked us to help write the initial draft for them to tweak when they are in support of certain things that might be opposed by other parties.
Well, I mean, we could direct staff to, go ahead. Would you like to do that?
I would be in
Ms.
favor
Kleinbaum?
of having staff look into that and
To work with Cal Water, maybe on, would you be willing to submit something in writing?
Make sure it has the mayor's signature on it.
That's what I get paid the big bucks for, that's why. So we would direct our city manager, I'm sure he'll delegate accordingly, and we can get some written comments that may help at that level.
Excellent. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen. It's all about water. It's essential. Thank you for being here.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.